So take a breath, lean in, and get ready. This is the My New Norm podcast. Season 6 begins now.
Camera speed. Down production. Take
if
one.
we can, this is the opening cut.
We all have our stories of change and challenges, and it is my hope that these episodes will provide encouragement. Remember to follow, listen, and share with those you know. This is Barry Scott Young, your host on the My New Norm podcast.
It was 32 years ago. I remember it like yesterday. We were on a project, and I get the call on the radio that, Donnie's down, and I show up, and the EMTs there just took over from our crew. Our crew are, by the way, people that are related or traveled with the young man. We were both the same age, both expecting our first daughters. She clearly did not get the opportunity to meet her dad. His life flight touched down and took off again, and it was my job to go back and tell the crew that I was in charge of a young project manager that, he hadn't made it. And I said, if I continue to be in this industry, that could never happen again. Prior to that day, I was a young, go-getting project manager who thought they knew it all.
Yeah.
After that day, I realized I knew nothing, and I had so much to learn. And so from there on, I really went on a life quest to figure out not only what I needed to learn from my industry to prevent mishaps and issues. I ultimately found out what I was learning helps prevent issues and mishaps and problems in our personal life. They're the same tools.
Yeah.
I realized, hey, this is great. And that was one of the motivations of the book, was the tools that I learned how to use to help Fortune 500 clients now. It's on some of the largest, most dangerous demolition projects in the world, are the same tools and resources that we can use every day.
Well, today I'm joined by my friend Tim Barker, and he is author of a powerful new book. It's entitled Boom: What to Do When Your Life Blows Up All Around You. And it comes out this week, so I am impressed that you're here not only talking about the book, but talking about the behind the scenes about your life. Tim, welcome to My New Norm, and how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Barry. Thank you so much.
I'm so excited you're here and excited about your new book coming out this week. So give us a little hint on the book, and then we'll get into our conversation today.
Yeah, so the book is really just a story that I think relates with everybody's story. And that is, we've all faced many trials and challenges and struggles. And what's encouraged me over the years is people that didn't give up during their darkest days. And when I realized that I had some of those valleys in my life, and what's arguably one of the most dangerous fields that you can be in, and the weight, the responsibility I carry on my shoulders with the loss, literally helping owners make life and death decisions regularly, I just felt like my story, especially the unvarnished low times and the mental and spiritual and other challenges that we faced and we're able to overcome, thanks to friendships, thanks to our faith and a lot of prayer, but not really seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, not really even seeing how we could even recover from some of these. And at times, just really being angry at everybody. And I wouldn't admit at the time that I was angry at God, but I was just like, wow, what is going on here? What did I do to deserve this? And then on the other side of that, to not only see what occurred from it that was positive, but also what rough edges God needed to chip off or
Yeah.
sand off. And unfortunately, I have so many, so it was so painful when you when you get chipped and sanded and solved the areas of your
Yeah.
life that just need to go away if you want to grow and if you want to um, help ultimately help others, because at the end of the day,
Yeah.
that's really all that matters. You can have all the success in the world and be known in your industry and have a little influence and affluence and I've had all that, and it's just empty. It doesn't really lead anywhere.
Yeah.
Um, but to have that faith that grounds you in something that's real, that's lasting forever,
Yeah.
will really carry you through. Even at times when you realize, hey, God, what are you doing here? If you're in control, why are you allowing this to happen?
Mhm. Well, the title of the book is very fitting because of what you do. It's the most dangerous industry in the world. What exactly do you do, and why is the title so fitting?
Yeah, it's a play on words. I'm a demolition expert, and so what that means is I was a contractor for 20 years. If you've seen the building implosions and the big plants and structures and stadiums, matter of fact, I was there when the dunes came down, when Steve Wynn was making way for the what's now the
Oh,
Bellagio, and just many iconic projects and structures over the years. And it's after about 20 years as a contractor, I had the opportunity. Well, actually, I was terminated. You got to read it in the book. It was awful. I thought one of the worst days of my life or period, professionally speaking, but ended up being one of the best opportunities because I ultimately went to work for a consultant, and that consultant ultimately was one of the largest in the world, and I was their subject matter expert for all things related to demolition.
Mhm.
And this company that I worked for, they built many of the iconic structures that we're all familiar with, from the Hoover Dam to the World Trade Center to the World One Center after 9/11 to many of the bridges. And uh, they just here in Atlanta, Georgia, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. And then I'm called in afterwards. We for example, there after the Mercedes-Benz Stadium was built, I was called in to be the consultant, third-party subject matter expert to make sure that the implosion of the Georgia Dome
Oh,
went as planned, which was
okay.
a very very dangerous project. It's only 70 feet from the new 1.6
Yeah, I
billion
saw the
dollar.
video and it
Yes.
looked like it was a few feet away.
Yeah.
So you don't know. It's one thing to blow up the structure, but to keep the city and the people safe is really the tough work, isn't it?
It is, and the there, for example, we spent $500,000 just on the computer modeling alone to make sure that that structure would fall in the way that it should. But there were a lot of other things that I addressed behind the scenes that makes for good reading, which never is shared with the public. For example, um, there was a MARTA tunnel between the Mercedes-Benz Stadium and the Georgia Dome. And it was only 12 feet underground. The Georgia Dome was abutting parking structures on two sides. If you look at the Google Earth images, it looks like it's just sitting next to structures that are on grade. Those are actually grassy lots on top of 5-story parking structures. And so here it is touching on two sides, 80 feet away from the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. But the big risk there is the public. You've got hundreds of thousands of people coming out, and there has been events where, unfortunately, on the birthday of one of my daughters, I remember this was well, nearly 30 years ago now, but she was 6. On her 6th birthday, there was a young girl named Katie Bender in Australia. She was 12, I think, at the time, and they were watching an implosion, and a piece of shrapnel decapitated her there while she was standing with her parents.
No.
So these are the kind of things that happen that we know about in our industry. Matter of fact, right after that, I had just been involved in a project in Birmingham. My 2 daughters were in my parents' arms while they were girls. This is many years ago, and and it's in the book. But they 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm there with the mayor. They push the ceremonial plunger, and we usually have an expert pushing the button, the real one. But after the building came down, I went over to see my parents and my daughters, and the the public left, but I saw pieces of concrete in the parking lot. And I asked my crew, did you sweep this parking lot before we we got started? And they assured me they did. So that clearly was from the implosion. So from that point forward, I
Ah,
started to discourage any public making implosions a public spectacle, which I got a lot of criticism from my industry, by the way. So there's a lot of things, a lot of battles I fought within my industry to keep people safe, that the industry, especially some of the younger, newer players, just haven't been around as long as I have been to
yeah.
see what kind of problems can occur. And for example, there in Vegas, when the Dunes Hotel, before these two incidents happened that I just shared with you, there was 300,000 people out there on the street. I mean, it was the biggest firework display. Steve Wynn had a cannon over at Treasure Island, and the cannon went off, and when the cannon hit the dunes went up in a fireball, and then it came down behind the fireworks. And so again, things that I thought was fun and exciting when I was a kid. As I grew older,
Right.
and the responsibility was on my shoulders, I'm the guy that the owners are hiring now to say, hey, Tim, are we safe? And by the way, if everything doesn't go off well, they don't blame the contractor, they blame me.
Right.
They say, hey, Tim, isn't that what we hired you for?
Right.
Just
Right.
pick the contractor and to manage them and make sure things went safely. Now that's building implosions. Everybody's seen those. They're very popular. That's 1% of our industry. The other 99% of what we do to bring down tall, massive structures, power plants, stadiums without explosives is far more dangerous, far more fatal. And the reason that you don't know about that is because those cameras, that footage is not shared to the public. It's those cameras are
Oh,
collected when things go wrong, and we keep those things quiet and try not to bring them out in the public. But what's not hidden is that fatality rate, as you mentioned, the amount of fatalities that we have, some years as many as 12. Well, that doesn't seem like a lot, but this is a very small industry, and there's only about 10, maybe 15 players in the space that I work in, the large, tall, complicated. I only get called in, by the way, Barry, if somebody can't sleep well at night and it's very dangerous. they're not
wow.
they're not calling me in for the easy stuff, and
Right.
um, and that's where we've had and we continue to have fatalities, and God has blessed me with a perfect track record. I mean, I haven't had anyone
Man.
even lose a day's work on any of the projects I've been involved with for almost 2 decades now. And so
Man.
it's a miracle. And matter of fact, the company I used to work for said, Tim, you can't tell people that. No one's going to believe you. Now that I don't work there, I love telling people that because they're one of my competitors. And I say, hey, they have the information to prove that I'm lying or not. And if I
Right.
am, go with them and not with me.
Right. Right.
But check, go ahead and check. So,
Ah,
yeah, it's exciting. It's a play on words, but, and I've failed. The book starts off from the very first few pages. It was 32 years ago. I remember it like yesterday. We were on a project, and I get the call on the radio that Donnie's down, and I show up, and the EMTs there just took over from our crew. Our crew are, by the way, people that are related or traveled with the young man. We were both the same age, both expecting our first daughters. She clearly did not get the opportunity to meet her dad. His life flight touched down and took off again. And then it was my job to go back and tell the crew that I was in charge of, a young project manager, that, he hadn't made it. And I said, if I continue to be in this industry, that could never happen again. Prior to that day, I was a young go-getting project manager who thought they knew it all.
yeah.
After that day, I realized I knew nothing, and I had so much to learn. And so from there on, I really went on a life quest to figure out not only what I needed to learn from my industry to prevent mishaps and issues. I ultimately found out what I was learning helps prevent issues and mishaps and problems in our personal life. They're the same tools.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
realized, hey, this is great. And that was one of the motivations of the book, was the things that I learned professionally, the tools that I learned how to use to help Fortune 500 clients now. Internationally, I have some clients in Australia, and I've been to the UK and South Africa. But the tools that I use now to help clients on some of the largest, most dangerous demolition projects in the world are the same tools and resources that we can use every day. I'll tell you, the hardest part about this is owning up to our part of the issue. And oftentimes we may feel like it's 5 or 10%, but in reality, it's probably 50%. But that's the hardest part is, can we be transparent? Can we own up to our shortcomings? Are we open to criticism? Are we open to growth? And, as a young 25-year-old project manager, I wasn't. Post fatality, I definitely was. I was all ears. And so for some of us that are hard-headed like myself, we unfortunately have to get, rose tinted glasses knocked off our face before we start to see clear and see clearly that sometimes the problems are not that we're a victim and, we're depressed. It's although all that happens, but oftentimes it's, we're part of the problem.
What's strange as you're talking, you can go through every layer of protection, walking through, checking things, and it could come down to a product that you purchased that failed. The explosives or the wiring. So the reason why I say this conversation is about high risk leadership is because you don't know where the issue is going to be. And has there ever been a product that failed, not just your checkoff list?
Sure, most definitely. And so, or even the application of the product. So I mentioned the Georgia Dome. There was, I think, 3,600 charges, 6 miles of detonation cord. So it was wrought with opportunities for mishaps. You think of dominoes coming down. Well, think about when we took the Atlanta Fulton County Stadium, or I shouldn't say we, one of my competitors did. I was involved in the planning, but it came down like a dominoes. But all the charges had to go off in sequence, and that det cord had to stay connected. So anticipating that some of those charges or the det cord could knock offline, I got with the Wayne Wadsworth, who was over the whole program. He was over the building of the Mercedes-Benz $1.8 billion stadium, but he was also over ultimately in charge of the demolition and the outcome. And I said, hey, Wayne, there's a potential here that we could have a partial stand up. And he said, well, what's that? And I said, well, if the whole structure doesn't come down because some of the charges didn't go off.
Wow.
And if we do, you need to be prepared to speak to the press at the post-implosion press conference. And he said, well, we're not planning on having a post-implosion press conference. I said, well, hopefully we don't need one, but if it doesn't go well, you're going to have one if you want it or not. And so let me give you some speaking points to how to address this. And along with some other potentially even worse outcomes, somebody being injured or the Mercedes-Benz Stadium being substantially damaged, which thankfully neither of those things occurred. But what did occur, we had a partial stand-up. So Wayne got up there at the post-implosion press conference and said, hey, I told him, tell the truth, but only tell the truth. Don't elaborate. And the truth was the structure, for the most part, came down safely. There was no damage to the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. Nobody was injured. Overall, it's a huge success. Yes, we do have these 2 portions of the structure that remain standing. We already have a plan in place before this ever happened, because this is common to come back in a couple of weeks. We'll get those down, and we moved on, and no other questions. And the reason why that was so important that he calmly and succinctly provided that truth was because if the press smelt blood, if he got up there and was nervous,
right,
and they started asking a lot of questions like, whoa, is the explosive still in the remaining portion? Well, it was. I didn't want him asking that question. It was that remaining portion of the structure structurally compromised? Yes, it was. I didn't want him. Now, he would have had to answer them correctly and honestly, but then that would have led to a bunch of other contingency plans that we had in place to address it. Thankfully, they didn't answer them. So we had a security guard out there to make sure nobody got too close to it, because the next couple of weeks, I think there was a Final Four basketball game and an NFL game, and people were walking right by that structure for 2 weeks before we could bring it down 2 weeks later. Now, was it safe for them to be there? Most definitely. It wasn't an issue. But the difference between what the public needs to know sometimes and what they don't need to know are 2 different things, and it can make or break a project. They didn't need, the news, again, they smell blood. They're going to create hysteria. What bleeds leads. And it's kind of like politics. You people politically want to create fear and division because it leads to money. It leads to support. It's really sad. It's unfortunate. We see the same thing with news. And so again, being able to manage those situations and having the experience, the knowledge that only comes with experience to say, here's some potential outcomes. Here's what we need to do. And I could go on and on. There were some other things on that job that just wasn't right. That I'll just keep to myself for now, that I had to, arm wrestle with the contractor up till like 3 a.m. And I said, hey, if you don't address this, I'm going to shut the job down. I have the ability to shut the job down with, reporters and thousands of people showing up the next day. I would not be popular by any means, but that's my job. And they had to, I forced them to take care of some issues and some places that we stepped in to help them where they didn't think they needed help, but they certainly did. And I'll keep that to myself. But what's so funny about that is the contractor that, I'm fighting with his people. What they didn't know is I knew their boss. We were friends. I could have got on the phone and went around them in a heartbeat. Never did. Never, just stayed in the chain of command. So we're going to work this out. And what's interesting is the next day, the boss, the owner of their company, shows up and he runs into me and says, hey, Tim, I didn't know you were here. Are you involved? I said, a little bit, behind the scenes, and just laughed. And so I moved on. And what's neat is I can share these stories with him now. And he realizes how much I was helping him, whereas his own team were resisting my involvement and my assistance. And that to me is a day-to-day affair where I have the phone numbers for the owners of these companies, and I can circumvent and go around the crew leaders, but I don't. I work it out with them. I want them to learn. I don't want them to think that I'm just going to go around them. And I definitely don't want my clients to think that I'm going to go around them and just call up the owner of the contractor that they hired. But I sit on the board with these guys. It's a small industry. I've known many of these people, or most of them, longer than I've known my wife, who I've been married for 26 years. So it's a small group. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the people that do what we do. It's incredibly dangerous. But as you can read in the book, there are some real nail-biting stories. And I love it because I have the tools and the resources, which I share in the book, to prevent bad things from happening. They're called risk mitigation resources, and they can be used in every area of our lives.
We'll be right back.
Hey friends, Austin here. Hope you're having a fantastic day. I have lived overseas in China, South Africa for almost 10 years of my life. Studied more than 12 languages in depth, and taught English as a second language for more than 20 years in several different contexts. And so I often get asked, what does it take to learn a new language, and what's the best approach?
Guys, you are never going to believe this new language learning tactic I have. Just hang with me here. Literally all you need is a book in your target language and this spot right here, and with one little skielik praat ek vlot Afrikaans. Ek kan nie Engels praat nie in een oomblik. Ja! En dit werk met ander ene ook. 我现在在说中文吗？天啊，成功了！这本书也会吗？你太太，你太太is is Benzile? Want to learn a new language? Check out my new ebook called Learn Any Language Easily. You're going to love it.
Hey, thanks for listening to this podcast. Hey, did you know that you can choose between audio and video formats? Well, you can. Check out the video episodes on Spotify and YouTube. And audio, well, you'll find those on all of your major platforms as well. And now, back to the episode. Follow, listen, and share with those you know. I remember A.W. Tozer said, God never uses anyone greatly until he tests them deeply. And that is so true of you and your book. So the book is really revealing the different things that you went through in your own personal life. And you, by the way, shared very, very honestly for the reader to pick up different details, but it was because of what you went through that has allowed you to have wisdom and to be the man that you need to be for what you're doing.
Yeah, thank you for that.
So,
You've heard it said, we can learn by our mistakes, but a wise person will learn by other people's mistakes. So I'm hoping there's some wise people out there that will learn by my mistakes and not have to repeat them themselves. And as you pointed out in the book, I've not only failed at work, I failed in my marriage. I was previously married. I share that story. I failed in my business. I was a contractor. After 20 years, that failed miserably. I share that. But in each of those situations, in my faith, it's do you take an honest look at what happened? Can you see, what changes need to be made, what improvements? And in some of those situations, I actually look back and I see them as blessings. At the time, I was just cursing the devil for them.
right,
And
right.
now, in some of them, you get to the point and go, wow, I wouldn't be where I am now in this area of my life if I hadn't gone through that refining, that valley, that struggle. Look at King David. I mean, he went up against Goliath. If he'd never gone up against Goliath and overtook that giant, we wouldn't know of him. He would have been not somebody that we talk about this day. So we're all facing Goliaths. We're all facing challenges. We're all facing, and they're in different areas. And that's why I share. I know I've talked a lot about work because we're talking about leadership. There's definitely a bunch of great applications there, but the book really was really written to hopefully connect with everybody, young and old, male and female.
Yeah.
The Paris in a Day chapter, when I just really went overboard in my proposal to Tina, not wanting her to ever feel like she was second because I was previously married, and God honored that. I couldn't have orchestrated that. Those 3 days and had everything go off perfectly if God wasn't in on it. And that was my prayer. It's like, God, if you're in on this, and it was better than I could have even planned, as I mentioned in the book. Don't want to give it away. I think it's my favorite chapter. I've listened to that one, read that one several times.
What chapter is it?
Paris in a Day.
Paris.
I think it's the seventh chapter. Yeah. There was times that were actually much worse that's even in the book, but I didn't want it to be cringy. I didn't want to betray anyone's trust. I've actually had family members said, "Hey, Dad, you can share this part of my story." I said, "Hey, sweetie, that's your story." I said, "But there's some things that things that happen to us is one thing. Things that happen to our wives, our daughters, our kids, ooh, that's a whole different category." And I could only allude to that, even though I'd have their permission to go into detail. It wasn't for me to share their story. But, my wife and I, we made it through some really challenging times as a family. And again, I only allude to those things just because they're too difficult to talk about, even read about. And that's gonna be interesting. People are gonna read it and go, "Wow, this is pretty rough." It was worse. There were a couple times it was a lot worse, but the principles still apply. When we're down and out, when we've lost everything, is when we're open. And there's nothing wrong with that. When where else are you gonna turn? And what's great about God, He doesn't, He's gonna take us wherever we're at.
Right.
He owns it all. So whether we're the richest or the poorest person in the world doesn't impress it. So
Wow.
He'll take us just like we are.
Well, Tim, I know that the book comes out this week, and the proceeds, you kind of set it up to where it really doesn't go to you. It goes to fuel a ministry that you started and that is affecting lives around the world. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so roiministry.org, during one of those valleys, probably one of the worst valleys in our life, when I was just saying, God, what are you doing here? We've been serving in our local church. We've been giving. We're helping people around the world through John Maxwell's organization, Equip, and I prayed a really dangerous prayer, and it was, God, do whatever you need to do so we can make a greater impact. God answered that prayer in a way that I wouldn't wish on my enemies at the time. And we ended up in lawsuits, lost our 401k, lost the business, ended up having to move out of our house, living with a friend. And during that time, while I was in litigation for 3 years trying to get paid for work that we had done, I had come across some research that 97% of all Christian giving worldwide was going to basically the wealthiest rich nations in the world.
When I discovered that I could make a huge difference in this world, it changed everything for me. Did you know that research shows that nearly all Christian giving worldwide goes to minister to people and nations that are predominantly Christian, and very little is used to minister to the lost nations of the world? In addition, the predominantly poor and lost are 300 times more receptive to Jesus Christ as compared to where most Christian giving is utilized today. In testing this, we identified the top 10 ministries that we could find in the world based upon measurable outcomes per dollar invested. What we stumbled upon was amazing. Rather than just 300 times greater results, as the research showed for evangelism, our top 10 ministries resulted in over 30,000 times greater outcomes for evangelism, discipleship, and Christ-focused compassion ministries. What this all means is rather than just providing food and clean water for one person for a year, who is also led to the Lord and taken through the New Testament, for the same dollar amount, through our top 10 ministries, we're able to do this for well over 30,000 people. Let me say that again. $1 invested to our top 10 ministries gets a 30,000 times greater result than the average dollar given today. Now is your opportunity to apply this eternal return on investment approach. It will exponentially increase your lasting impact in this world, as it will matter to you, God, and many others forever. We invite you to visit our website at roiministry.org. There you will find an eROI calculator and see how easily we can make wiser investments into God's kingdom. Investments that will result in huge lasting outcomes where moth, rust, and market fluctuations can never destroy.
We talk about the poor, the world's poorest and the poor. And I had just met them through 3 years with Maxwell's organization, being in Indonesia and Sierra Leone, West Africa, and Eastern Russia. And so these people were no longer impersonal numbers to me. They were friends and family, just the greatest people you'd ever meet. And but overall, our commitment to them was less than 1/3 of 1%. And so my heart was broken. And I said, God, what do you want me to do with this? And thankfully, the research also showed that the less than 1% that made it to what at the time was the billion poorest lost people in the world saw the greatest results, like 3,000 times greater results than where most of the money was going. 97% was going. And so we researched that and we found out it was true. And we found the top 10 organizations in the world that were reaching the poorest lost in the world. Again, with the gospel, with hope, with discipleship, church planning, clean water, housing, medical, and we promoted them as a top 10 list. That's what came out of that valley, and God answered that prayer because we've had years where we know there's been millions have gone to these organizations thanks to our promotion of them, and millions of dollars doesn't impress God, but millions to these organizations means millions of people have been impacted in ways that matter forever to them, to God, and to the giver, who I believe will be blessed. I believe that on the other side of eternity, we get to meet these people. And won't it be great to meet more than a dozen people that we've impacted in our lives, but to meet hundreds and for some thousands, maybe a few millions, because we were faithful with what God gave us. So that's what came out of that valley was roiministry.org. And so over the last 10 years, we have grown. We've become recognized. People have said, Tim, what you guys are doing is really changing the whole way people are looking at giving. The question is, what matters to God most? And he clearly provides that in his word. And so we started promoting this model. It's taken notice in the Christian giving community. It's changed in the way that people are giving. They're starting to think now about where they give. And it's to me, I'm really excited because as I read God's word, the instructions were there all along, in the parables of the minas and the talents, right? The ones that were faithful. And God's not talking about just money there. He's talking about what are we doing with our lives? Are we multiplying the kingdom with what he's given us, or are we just addition, or did we go bury it? And the same thing with the greatest commandment. What was great about Jesus reaching back to Deuteronomy 5:6, when he references the love of the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, your strength, he adds mind in there. In addition to Leviticus 8, I think it's 19:18, to love your neighbors as yourself. That's like us changing the Lord's Prayer. You wouldn't do that without people noticing it. The Shema, that prayer, by the way, every Christian family, they recited it every day. And so you couldn't mix up that prayer without somebody taking note. And so clearly God, or Jesus, wants us to use our mind. He wants us to use our head in addition to our heart and our soul and our strength. And so there's just so much. Again, you can look at the research, you can look at what God's word says. They both point to this, to what we're doing. And what we're doing is just finding the organizations that are making the greatest measurable impact per dollar, and we're promoting them on a top 10 list. Now, I'm the first to tell you that it's not God's top 10 list. There's organizations out there, people that are doing far greater things, but it's a great tool. Sometimes people will ask me, Tim, who's your favorite? And I said, well, they would have never made our top 10 list. But her name was Henrietta Mears. She died the year I was born. A lot of people have never heard of her. She just invested into youth. She, like you, Barry, she was like a youth pastor. And people go, well, why was she so significant? Because if you look back to Bill and Von A. Bright, founders of Campus Crusade for Christ, she led them to the Lord. They started that ministry in her house. The founder of Young Life, many senators, many Billy Graham said, other than his wife, she had more of an influence on his life than any other person. So bottom line there, Barry, your and my generation was impacted more by this young lady than any of the other names that I just spouted off to you, because they wouldn't have been who they are. And they said that in their words, if it hadn't been for her just investing. And so with that said, one of my favorite things to do is I've got a group of college guys that we meet with once a week through our church. And I've been investing in young adults my whole life. And it's just so rewarding, as thankfully my pastor told me a long time ago, find people that are investing in you that are further along, 10, 20 years, that can speak wisdom into your life and then pass that along to others. So God, during that most difficult time in our life, he laid that vision on our heart. And once we got faithful and started doing it, quickly restored the years the locust ate financially. And what's interesting is not only financially did we do much better after God got us back on our feet, God gave me so much influence in my industry. So I'm one of maybe 1 or 2, 3 people that do what I do. There's not many of us that are independent consultants for the high risk projects. And so he allowed me to change our industry. I helped them develop their first ever professional certification, first ever 40-hour certificate, just a lot of things. And
Wow.
So God honored it. So so I hope that answers your question, maybe more than you're looking for. But
No,
the
that's
bottom line
great.
there is if you've asked God to make some changes in your life, and he has to take you through some difficult times, try to embrace it.
Well, Tim, the book is called Boom, What Can You Do When Life Around You Blows Up? Amazing. This week it comes out, and I know there's listeners that are listening. And what would you say to them about where they are with crisis, with being overwhelmed? What do you want them to get out of the book?
Yeah, I just want them to be encouraged. And so no matter what you're going through, for me, I read a lot of books I love history. So I loved reading about, the challenges Abe Lincoln or William Wilberforce or others that they were facing during difficult times. And so I felt like if I put mine that would hopefully relate to more of a more recent modern reader, male or female, that hopefully that it would encourage them to not give up, and at a minimum take what challenging times that they've been through, and maybe in the next chapter of their life, maybe they can help other people who are going through that same challenge and encourage them, and then ultimately get them to a place. There's an ultimate goal in this book, and that's ultimately get people to a place of helping others. So whether you're incredibly successful or you're going through a struggle, the experts will say, and I only learned this after I wrote the book, after I took the book to some experts, and they said, oh, no, this is a proven principle you're pointing out here, Tim, that whether you're incredibly successful or you're going through a challenging time, you need to be helping others, because that's the only place that you're going to find fulfillment.
Right.
And which you and I would add, helping others in ways that are going to matter for eternity. Not just, it's not either or, it's both, but
Right.
figuring out how to do both. And so I think, and it was for us, as a single dad with 2 daughters after the first divorce, Emily and Sarah and I, we went down the soup lines. We're helping with homeless people. And it's just amazing when you take the focus off yourself,
Yeah.
and put it on others, and find somebody. I also talk about this in the book. Always find somebody that's going through something worse than you are. And they're not hard to find.
Well, I commend you for not only the book, but the proceeds of the book will continue what you have just said to help others in other places. I want to say it would be good for you to tell us how to get the book and then the website for the ministry as well.
Sure. Yeah. You just Google, boom, what to do when the world blows up around
Boom.
you, or boom, Tim Barker. You can, Google boom, Tim Barker. It'll take you to Amazon. You can get it on the paperback. You can get a hardcover. You can get the Audible version, the ebook. So it's in all the formats. If you want to find out more about me and find some material that'll help put you to sleep at night, you can Google Tim Barker and demolition. There's a lot of information. Again, it's a small industry. I've been one of the thought leaders there for a while. And so you can get a little more background on myself, professionally speaking. But again, just boom, Tim Barker, the book. And I think it will encourage you greatly. And then hopefully, as Barry said, all profits are going. We're not receiving any profits. We underwrite all the expense for our ministry. We've never received a dime, any of us, any of our board members. We don't have any staff that gets paid. We're all volunteers. And so we're going to continue the same thing with the books. I know that we're all facing challenges. Nobody in this world is going through life without a struggle. So I think it will encourage everyone. And I think people will thank you for giving them a copy, and hopefully they'll pass it on, pay it forward to others. And ultimately, like you said, Barry, if there are any substantial proceeds from the book, it's going right back into helping others. So,
Wow. I want to thank you, Tim, for being here today, and thank you for being a great friend all these years and sharing not only your story, but putting it into words. We honor the work you do in the world's most dangerous industry, and we thank you for giving us a picture of what real leadership is: tested, refined, and redeemed looks like. Thank you, Tim, for being here today.
hey, thank you, Barry. And I know I'm no Billy Graham or Bill Bright, but you definitely were my Henrietta Mears. So what a wonderful youth pastor. And I can tell you, I wouldn't be here today doing what I'm doing if it wasn't for you. And so thank you very much. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, I love you, Tim.